Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We're live today at Ventnor Social, 6400 block Ventnor Avenue, Ventnor. We are hanging out with the Lombardi Trophy. You can stop out and get your picture taken with the Lombardi Trophy throughout today's show. Stop out and see us. And, of course, we're here till 6 o'clock tonight with the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. It's time for today's Football at 4. Adam Caplan, always on the Happy Hour Friday. We got some Eagles that are under the microscope today, offense, and we'll take a look at some of those players who are going to be getting a closer look when we get to training camp. Let's bring in Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, right now for Friday's edition of Football at 4. Adam, what's up, dude? How are you?
Hey, good to talk to you, Mike. Yeah, on this segment, Mike, we're also going to talk about coaches, too. We're going to include them under the microscope. On last Friday's show, we talked about players who could have some important roles and what those might be and what they're going to look like from what we understand. But this one is when we get to training camp in less than 4 weeks, there will be some coaches and players we'll be having an eye on, and we're going to start with coaches. And the first one is obvious, and that's Kevin Patullo, who's known Nick Sirianni for 18 years. They worked together first with the Chiefs in 2007, obviously very close friends. And this is the first time Patullo has ever called plays. He's worked closely with quarterbacks and receivers over his career, but this is the first time that he's going to call the plays. Now, I talked to someone who he's worked with in the past, and this is important, Mike, what I'm about to tell you. He's very open for ideas. Some coaches, some play callers I've heard over the years they're really not interested in what other coaches want to have to bring to the table. This guy is a good communicator. He's also worked now with Hurts. This is his fifth year working together. He knows his strengths and weaknesses, but when you look at a play caller, Mike, you don't know how good he is until he gets there. Everyone can be very positive about him, which they are. He was the chief of staff. Not only was he the pass game coordinator for Sirianni, as I understand it, he was his chief of staff. Kevin took care of a lot of things that Nick didn't have time to get done. But now that goes to someone else, and I believe it's going to be Cole Peterson, who was hired from UAB, who will handle a lot of day-to-day chores that Nick doesn't have time for. But the bottom line is with Kevin Patullo, Mike, it's a big job for him. It's a big step up. They just won the Super Bowl, and there's going to be pressure on this guy. Let's call it like it is, Mike. There are going to be a lot of eyes on this guy to see if he can do the job well.
Well, obviously, Patullo has a big job. He's the, third or fourth offensive play caller you had. It's Sirianni, if you want to count him as the first one there. So there's a lot of different voices in that position. But what other coach might be now under the microscope with Patullo being the offensive coordinator? Yeah,
look, it's Jalen's fifth play caller since he's been the Eagles quarterback. Now, the next one is we got to talk about, because this is yet another quarterback's coach to work with Jalen Hurts, Scott Loeffler, the former Bowling Green head coach. Now, Loeffler, he's been a coach for about 25 years. He worked in the NFL one time for 1 year with the Detroit Lions. Now, as I told you, Mike, a couple weeks ago, is that Loeffler was likely going to be the Browns' quarterbacks coach of 2015 under John DeFilippo. But what happened was it came down to Loeffler and Kevin O'Connell. And O'Connell came in at the last minute, I'm told, and he went up getting the job over Loeffler. Loeffler would leave. He'd go to another college job. And then, as I mentioned, he's coached a lot. He's coached quarterbacks. He's called plays. And he's been a head coach. And I'm told he coaches very hard, which is what you want. You want guys who will coach hard at that position. He's a good communicator. Again, the guy's been a head coach. You like that. This is an interesting hire. We weren't thinking they'd go to the college route, but because Loeffler's been a head coach, I think that alleviates the issue, Mike, because 2 years ago, remember, they hired a bunch of college assistants to be on the defensive staff, and that was an absolute nightmare. But this is actually a good move, but we're going to keep an eye on the communication between Loeffler and Hurts, because remember, the quarterback's coach almost always works more with the quarterback than the offense coordinator does, so we're going to keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, and, I know you guys talked to John DeFilippo a lot. A lot of, when him and Wentz had his great, year back then, and then he was gone, a lot of people kind of tied it to him not having that guy being tough on him. So that is a very important role.
Yeah, we actually were the first ones to bring that up. We brought that up in 2018, the hard coaching from Flip. There's no question that part of Wentz's downfall was that. And here's the other thing, Mike, and we'll move on after this last note. I think what hurt Brian Johnson in 2023 is he was the go-between between Hurts and Sirianni when they had problems. And Brian Johnson is a soft-spoken guy. He just got caught in the middle. And I don't see that happening with Scott Loeffler, but we have to get there yet. We have to get there first. Let's hope there are no issues between Patullo and Sirianni. Because, look, 2 years ago, we saw what happened. That was bad. That part of the downfall of their offense and why Brian Johnson got fired was, the offensive being too stale. We saw it. Yeah, the defense collapsed. Everybody, our mom knows that. But the other problem was that their offense completely just went the other way. It was basically a facade, and then it just broke down. But the bottom line is, Mike, they just won a Super Bowl. They want to keep this well-oiled machine going. It's a very young team, which is a good thing.
All right, Adam Caplan, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Let's look at some of the players who are now under the microscope. You mentioned two coaches here. Let's start with your number one guy under the microscope.
Yeah, so let's go to the players here. So we mentioned the two coaches, right, on offense. And then when you look at Tyler Steen, Mike, this is one where they're I don't want to say they're handing him the job. He'll work with the ones first in training camp. Then the question is, could Kenyon Green or Matt Pryor push him? Their hope is that Steen takes a hold of it very quickly. If you remember 2 years ago, Steen struggled so badly as a rookie transitioning to guard that Cam Jurgens took the job right away. In fact, Steen never was allowed to compete for it in training camp. But now he walks into it to the number one job, but he's got to keep it. Now, they didn't sign Matt Pryor to start. That's not what they're thinking. They signed him to be a backup lineman, one of the first guys off the bench. That's what their hope is. That means with Tyler Steen will win it. Kenyon Green, look, the Eagles were trying to clear catches. We reported at the time $8.5 million with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. We understand that, but they also like Kenyon Green. I know Kenyon Green struggled mightily with Houston. We know that. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He just never lived up to it. This is, he's on the final year of his rookie deal, Mike, so he'll get a chance to compete for a job. And the guarantee on his contract is so low, Mike, he's not guaranteed to make it. He's really going to have to prove himself at training camp, Kenyon Green, just to make the football team.
All right, Adam, we know Saquon Barkley. In fact, we were at Ventnor Social today. There's a mural of him leaping over a Jacksonville defender. It will go down in history forever as a play. But who behind him should be under the microscope?
I would say both, Mike, because the number two job is open. As we noted, Mike, as soon as they signed, we said Dylan, we could tell you, was signed to be the closer. If they get a big lead, and their goal is not to have Barkley wear down, fourth quarter with 10 minutes left, there's a very good chance they're going to go to A.J. Dillon. Well, I say that, Mike, that's if he makes the football team. Let's not forget, Mike, he got a very low-end one-year deal. He got a one-year deal for less than $1.4 million. The guarantee on his contract is less than $200,000. That absolutely will not keep him on the team unless he plays well. He's got to perform well in training camp. But the problem is, Mike, if they wind up moving on from him, well, Shipley's not built to handle a high volume of carries. So if Barkley would get hurt and Dillon's off the team, they're obviously going to have to look elsewhere. The good thing is, Mike, there are several backs with size in free agency still available.
Yeah.
It's not like the Eagles would have leverage. Like they wouldn't have to worry about, who's out there? Well, Gus Edwards is out there. Jamal Williams is out there. Jeff Wilson's out there. Deontay Foreman's out there. There are plenty of running backs. They could wait, but their hope is that Dillon is what he once was. And that's a guy who could handle a lot of carries because he's got great size. There's no question about it.
On Thursday's show, Andrew was on. We had some mailbag questions for Andrew. One of the questions for him was, is Anaya Smith definitely the return man there? So I would imagine he would be under the microscope.
He is. No, he's definitely not we believe with the punt return job. That was by the way, that was part of the reason why they drafted him. He's a power slot. That was the term we were given, so we put that on our show. What does that mean? He's a guy who's really well built. He's less than 5'11", Mike, but he's 190 plus, very strong. He could run the football. He had 1 year in Texas A&M. He had over 40 carries. He's a very, very, very lowercase Deebo Samuel. He's not as talented as Deebo, to be clear, but Deebo Samuel at South Carolina and also with the Niners, he was a jack-of-all-trades player. You could play him at running back. You could play him as a slot receiver. Now, the difference between Smith and Debo amongst many is Anais Smith could not play on the outside where Debo could line up at the X, not really an X, more of the Z position or slot. Smith is strictly an inside receiver, but he's very talented. He's just not healthy last season. So this guy, I'm really looking forward to training camp. And plus, he's a slot receiver. They don't really have one per se. We know Devontae Smith has done well when he lines up inside, but they don't have a slot receiver. So this is a guy, Mike, who's got a real shot to make it, but he's got to prove himself.
Yeah, we know that Anais Smith, a draft choice last year.
Yep.
We'll see if he ends up being a part of the Eagles. And Avery Williams, we heard what Sirianni said about him. Sometimes that's an eye-opening thing there. All right, one more guy that might be under the microscope here.
Yeah, this guy is definitely under because they don't have a backup center. The Cam Jurgens, who's had a major injury history. If you go back to Nebraska, he had a bunch of foot injuries. He just came off the back surgery. He looked good, by the way. We watched him run a little bit on the side. He wasn't cleared to practice yet, but Cam's got to stay healthy because you don't want Brett Toth. I keep calling him Matt Toth. I don't know, former Eagle Matt Toth out of Iowa. It's actually Brett Toth, who's played just about every position in the National Football League, right tackle, left tackle, guard. He's also backup center. He's kind of like the guy who wouldn't leave, He just keeps coming back. An undrafted free agent in 2019 out of Army. Give the guy credit for not retiring and quitting football with all the injuries he's had, but he's still trying to play here. And Drew Kennel, they drafted to play center, not guard. He can play guard. They want him to win the backup center job, but it's another one. They drafted the guy specifically to play center. Yes, it gives him more value to play guard if they need it. He could also play guard, down the line if they ever draft another center or sign a veteran center. Maybe he plays guard, but the plan now is to work him in at center first, see if he can win that backup center job. And you remember his dad, Pete, who also played at Boston College.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like that lineage there from him, and we'll see how you mentioned Matt Pryor. The battle for those interior positions should be very interesting, but Tyler Steen, probably the top guy in terms of he's the only non-returning starter back on the team. I mean, every other guy on this roster started on the offense last year other than the right guard spot, so that will be an under the microscope spot. Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast. You can catch that on all podcasting platforms and, of course, right here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Adam, enjoy the weekend, man.